Question for short debate. Child Maintenance Service. The time limit is 1 hour. Lord Farmer.
My Lords, in the few days since I secured this debate, I have been contacted by a large number of organisations and individuals expressing strong views based on very difficult experiences as either paying or receiving parents in the child maintenance system. The Parliamentary Digital Engagement Team did sterling work to publicise this debate and elicit testimony from the public to inform it. I'm very grateful to every one of the 1,524 people who took the time to respond and hope to do some justice to their stories in my remarks. That the number using the child maintenance service across Great Britain is high is unsurprising, given that an estimated third of all children grow up in separated families. In December 2020, the Department for Work and Pensions reported that 756,500 children, roughly equivalent to the whole populations of Bristol and Newcastle cities combined, were covered by CMS arrangements. So this fairly small cohort of speakers today does not represent the importance of child maintenance reform to those directly involved, their extended families and wider society. At least we will have longer to unpack properly our concerns in this highly contested area of policy. To quote Professor Patrick Parkinson, a key architect of the Australian child support reforms, it, quote, involves making compromises between conflicting interests of mothers, fathers, children and the state. A win for one interest group is a loss for another. Child support policy is a complex and contentious area involving zero-sum calculations in political terms. So no pressure then, Minister. The contention is wholly understandable. The process of separation, however amicably achieved, is usually emotionally and financially stressful. A once intimate relationship is undergoing significant change, sometimes at the behest of one partner and strenuously resisted by the other. The indissolubility of parenthood and the important shift away from clean break divorce mean both parents will still need to cooperate, at the very least, around money and contact. History has taught us that there are no silver bullets and a whole host of potential unintended consequences when it comes to reforming child maintenance. Nearly 40 years ago, the seminal Finer report proposed a dedicated agency for administering maintenance payments. The ground lay fallow until 1993, when the Child Support Agency first opens its doors following the 1991 Child Support Act. Just 2 years later, more legislation was required to fix its considerable problems, setting the tone for the sporadic reforms that produced the current system in place since 2012. We appear overdue for another wave of change, especially as universal credit is now a much more mature welfare system. The interaction of benefits with child support payments is a particularly salient issue. A reformed child maintenance system must do even more to ensure paying and receiving parents and the children both are raising, albeit not under the same roof, are not living in financial poverty as a result of its operation. Looking very briefly at how the current system works, many separated parents agree and adhere to private family-based arrangements. The Child Maintenance Service, which replaced the Child Support Agency, is for parents who have been unable to do this. Around 2/3 of children are covered through direct pay arrangements, where the CMS calculates maintenance liabilities and parents arrange payments between themselves. A third are covered through collect and pay arrangements, where the CMS collects and manages payment between parents. Paying and receiving parents experience this system very differently, evidenced in response to the parliamentary survey. Almost half were from paying fathers, and almost all of the receiving parents, 40% of respondents, were mothers. Emerging themes from this exercise map onto those in the academic literature and other cases I was sent are, first, Paying parents highlighted how the nature of CMS calculations could lead to financial hardship, which was unalleviable by working longer hours, as any additional money would be directed towards child maintenance. The Social Security Advisory Committee recently had asked the DWP to examine ways of improving the child maintenance formula and its link with earning thresholds to address such concerns. So my first question to my noble friend the Minister, is any progress given to DWP's commitment to inform future policy development with the views expressed in SAC's consultation on this issue? Secondly, as the receiving parent obtains less money if children stay overnight, this can disincentivize sharing care. Third, and correlating with these previous two themes, paying parents reported impacts on their mental health, suicide attempts, and suicidal thoughts. Fourth, many reported issues with customer service, errors in calculations, and inconsistencies, as did many receiving parents. Three other areas stood out among receiving parents' responses. First, they were dissatisfied with the effectiveness of action taken to collect payments. Second, they felt inadequately safeguarded in situations involving domestic abuse, for example, the continuation of control by withholding payment. And finally, self-employment and 0 hours contracts were deemed to create loopholes so paying parents could hide income. I'm hoping that other noble lords will go into more detail on this wide range of issues, which I've only been able to touch on, and that they can suggest solutions to the Minister. Yet paying and receiving parents diverge in what they perceive to be acceptable ways of resolving systemic difficulties. For example, internationally, many child support systems now rely on both parents' income when determining liabilities, where most women work. In the parliamentary survey, 93% of paying parents said both parents' incomes should be included, compared with 18% of receiving parents. Admittedly, counting mothers' income can reduce incentives for workforce participation, but changes in Australia actually increased incentives for more qualified mothers, such as nurses and teachers, to return to work or increase hours. Their reforms, which have helped diminish the extent to which child support is a source of mass grievance, required designing a markedly complex formula which had to be fair across a very broad cross-section of circumstances. This took an expert committee, 8 months, and significant research. A similarly intense process would be required here. The other health warning is that as child support systems interact with a country's welfare system, translating ideas from one jurisdiction to another is always problematic. However, can I ask my noble friend the Minister if they have any plans to consult on the merits of aligning Great Britain with other child support systems by including both parents' incomes? Finally, one theme that did not emerge in the survey but was raised by the SAC committee in 2019 was whether separated parents are getting the support they need through a challenging and stressful time in their lives. The committee pointed to the need for an overarching, joined-up government strategy for separated parents, covering all relevant departments and child maintenance. Necessary but not sufficient is the commendable cross-departmental work to reduce parental conflict. I declare my interest as a director of the Family Hubs network in saying that access points to services offering far more holistic support could be provided in the family hubs the government has promised to champion. Such access was instrumental to the progress made in Australia. Family relationship centres, integral to their 2006 family law reforms, provide a gateway to the many different kinds of advice and support parents need. The germ of such an idea was in our own landmark 1989 Children Act, which specified local authorities should provide family centres where families could get help to overcome difficulties, including when parents separate. Can my noble friend the Minister inform the House how different departments of government are working together, including to deliver family hubs? In conclusion, child maintenance will always be a system under scrutiny, or being quote-unquote reformed. But state action must also be accompanied by a cultural shift in attitudes towards parental responsibility. We need to get to a place where there is a strong and pervasive expectation, first, that both parents will always share the cost of raising children, and second, with the holistic support I have described, they will sort out the thorny post-separation issues which stem the flow of child maintenance. Thank you.
Lord Mackay of Clashfern.
My Lords, this particular service goes back a long time for me. When I became Lord Chancellor in 1987, I quickly discovered that many parents who had been deserted had been successful in getting orders from the court for maintenance. But unfortunately, no sooner had they got the order than the husband disappeared, and they had no resources available to them for trying to find out where he was or how to raise the money that he was due. And needless to say, his attitude was not to come forward. That wasn't his business. His attitude was to hide himself as far as possible. Well, I found this an extremely difficult problem, and I knew by that time a little bit about Northern Ireland, and they had a state system for enforcing decrees of the court. And it seemed to me that this is what we would need, some form of state system which helped to find the person in question and formulated the responsibilities that he had. So eventually, this became government policy in the Act to which Lord Farmer has already referred, which set up the Children's Support Agency. Now, as the Lord Chancellor, I had the responsibility at that time for the divorce law. And a question arose as to whether or not we should take into our department the necessary work to set up the computer necessities of the CSA. My department very wisely suggested that that was better done in the department to which my noble friend represents today. And that was very wise advice, because originally it was thought that this new organization with its mighty computer would be able to adjust the requirements of each case to the circumstances of each case. Well, first of all, that was a very major task, but secondly, the circumstances changed very rapidly, and therefore it quickly came out of sync with the requirements. And the real difficulty and arrears that came from that source were arrears of the CSA following the paying parent. And it took a long time to get round that problem with gradual simplification of what was done by the computer, except in the end it became a job that depended on help with the revenue and so on, and they fixed a sum which was due by the paying parent in respect of the child, and that was shortening the process quite a bit. Unfortunately, the divorce arrangements remained the responsibility of the Lord Chancellor's Department, and it is now the responsibility of the Lord Chancellor and the Justice Department. That's to say, to adjust the kind of arrangements that will be needed, to adjudicate on these where necessary. And so far as that is concerned, my view is that it is important that the separation should be with as little animosity as possible. And animosity has been a sort of natural reaction to it in many quarters, but it needs a degree of help to overcome that, in my view. And that at the moment is, I think, with the Lord Chancellor's Department and the process of mediation and so on, which we discussed so fully all these years ago in the original proposal for no fault. I have never seen how allegations of fault get rid of animosity, because very, very seldom are the parties agreed about what happened. And the people who could tell what actually happened are rather scarce, because they won't be there in most of the occasions when animosity is shown and when the sort of basis for fault arises. It seems to me that that kind of investigation must be in a higher court than any court that we can have. And it's not a matter that I think should be allowed to blossom in our system, and I think that that has now happened. But the question of collecting money is still an important matter, and so far as I can see at the moment, is a distinct factor and a distinct function from trying to resolve problems with the family. When I was very concerned with this when our first Conservative government came into power after I had left the office, and I was anxious at the arrangements that were then made, because they seemed to be fairly heavily disposed against the receiving parent as well as the paying parent. I'm glad to see that the system that's operating now is 20% extra to the paying parent and 4% to the receiving parent, but I still find it very difficult to accept the view that because of the attitude of the parents, which requires this particular system to achieve payment, is the difficulty, I think, is that the 4% is really coming off what's due to the child. And
Can I ask
whatever
Noble Lord
else.
to wind up?
Sorry?
Can I ask the Noble Lord to wind up? We've got a 7-minute.
Oh, yes, certainly, yes. You can ask me to wind up very quickly. I understand that the difficulties of the present business in sorting out the money has created difficulty, which Lord Farmer has referred to, and I mentioned it in my communication with the Minister. And I don't know whether it's true or not, but I think it's worth considering. Thank you very much.
Baroness Massey of Darwin.
Lords, I'm pleased that the Noble Lord, Lord Farmer, is continuing his efforts to find information and a resolution to the issue of child maintenance, and I thank him for his very comprehensive introduction. It's always a great pleasure to hear the Noble Lord, Lord Mackay of Plashfern share his knowledge and experience, and I thank him too. My Lords, this is a vital issue affecting thousands of children and blighting some family relationships. Parental tensions, for whatever reason, affect a child's stability and mental health. Unclear or unfair systems of support for families causes this kind of tension. We need to ensure child-friendly arrangements with regard to child maintenance. As the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child states, the welfare of the child is paramount. I see that in 2019, the Social Security Advisory Committee published a report examining separated parents and the child maintenance system. It raised concerns about the formula used to calculate child maintenance. For example, the formula did not reflect the true cost of raising a child. Regional variation or the age of the child are implied in this, and not reflecting the household earnings of a receiving parent. A paying parent may be on a low income and struggle with costs, and a receiving parent may have partnered with someone on a higher income. The reduction in payments for overnight stays with a receiving parent may create perverse incentives. Maintenance payments are reduced if the paying parent has their child stay overnight, but not enough to cover the fixed costs, including needing a spare bedroom, of looking after children. I understand that the National Audit Office is carrying out a consultation to examine whether the child maintenance system is, and I quote, delivering value for money for children, separated parents and the taxpayer. What is the progress on this? I asked the Minister. My Lords, I've just completed a report for the Council of Europe on the impact of COVID-19 on children's rights. I interviewed a number of people, professionals, politicians and children, to inform my concerns. There was a general consensus that family tensions could result in the extreme in violence against children, domestic abuse and child mental health. Child poverty was one cause. All countries, of course, have different attempts to combat poverty and family difficulties. Ours in the UK seems to be particularly complex. A contribution to factor to family difficulties could be arrangements for child maintenance, and it's important to get it right. I hope that in this debate we shall receive more information about the impact of government reforms in creating the child maintenance service. For example, the charging for both parents and the notion of pushing parents to make private arrangements rather than use the CMS at all. I wonder how many parents are making private arrangements. It seems that there is no responsibility for collecting child support money unless the parents have tried a direct payment arrangement and it has failed. So what next? What do the statistics say? I realise that more are due very soon. And when will we see a dynamic development plan from the DWP? Perhaps the Minister can comment. And my Lords, the CMS has many problems. I will name a few and will be interested to know what the ways of dealing with this might be. Firstly, the collect and pay service charges a large fee to administer payments between parents, yet evidence shows that missed payments are spiralling into millions. What can be done to prevent this? We know that many single parents are struggling, and this has become more intense during the pandemic. Many are in severe financial difficulties. How will the department address this? How many staff have been redeployed at the beginning of the pandemic from their CMS roles? What has happened to these staff? How is enforcement action being carried out? Are video interviews in place? If so, what is the reaction from parents? A quarter of paying parents are not paying towards their liabilities. What action is being taken to redress this? What is the most recent estimate of current arrears owed from missed payments during the COVID crisis? And what plans will be put in place to resume reinforcements and how? Is there a timeline when paying parents will be reimbursed? How will the DWP deal with staff shortages? I believe there are now reduced assessment periods for parents. How will this affect change in earnings, especially during the risk of unemployment, such as during COVID? My Lords, it's essential that the statutory child support body is properly funded and functioning well. Is the Minister confident that the problems I have mentioned can be resolved to the benefit of parents and children? I look forward very much to hearing her response.
Lord McCall of Dulwich.
My Lords, I'd like first of all to thank the noble Lord Farmer for initiating this debate. Only yesterday I read a rather distressing case of a father who feels that the service has treated him unjustly and left him in a poor financial position, not of his own making, and caused him to lose his job. It left me wondering how many feel the same way. I suppose it's inevitable that some couples will be unhappy with what they regard as unjust arrangements. But does the Minister have any idea of the extent of these problems and how readily they can be put right? Is the appeal system, for instance, straightforward? Could the Minister tell us about the progress of the government's commitment to supporting parents to make family-based collaborative arrangements which frees them from having to pay the child maintenance service. Could the Minister update the House on the surveys which were commissioned looking at direct pay and closure clients? As the rates of family breakdown are the reason why so many children are living in separate homes, should we not be focusing on preventing this situation? We need an effective campaign to strengthen families before, during, and after separation to minimize the effects of unresolved and damaging conflicts. Thank you.
Baroness Eaton.
Thank you. My Lords, I join the other speakers in thanking my noble friend, Lord Farmer, for initiating this important debate. The fact that £1 billion is secured by the service for the benefit of children, lifting 120,000 children out of poverty every year by child support payments, is hugely welcome. The statistics show that 756,000 children are covered by child maintenance service arrangements. And I'm especially pleased to learn of the success of the child maintenance service investigators who, through the courts, pursued fathers who try to avoid supporting their children when they financially are well able to do so. Some recent reforms in the service are most welcome, including the Apply Online service, which is available every day throughout the year. It is encouraging that the service is consulting until August on additional proposals to modernise and improve the service, and that it is continuing to keep child maintenance policy and operational delivery under review. Seeing the large numbers of children being supported by the service is good news, but also it is a sad reflection on the number of relationship breakdowns that have occurred, putting children in this position. It's important that we recognise the very valuable work being done through the government's Reducing Parental Conflict programme. If help can be given at the start of relationship breakdown, the conflict can often be reduced. The child maintenance service too often has to do with two people who hate each other, which makes complex circumstances more difficult when arranging child maintenance payments. Additionally, it is good to see the support that is being given by the government to the family hubs, so ably mentioned by my noble friend Lord Farmer. The support that families can receive from the family hubs is hugely beneficial. They are sometimes described as the place that starts the repair. The general public often hear a narrative of uncaring, non-resident parents refusing to meet their obligations to help to provide for their children. I know that in many cases, the reality for parents on low incomes is very different. I would ask my noble friend, the Minister, if you could look at what appears to be a flaw in the regulations. I'm a great supporter of universal credit, which makes work pay, but I believe the interaction with child maintenance appears to undermine UC. I believe this point has been referred to in two reports by the Centre for Social Justice in 2014 and 2018, and also by the Social Security Advisory Committee in 2019. The problems arise from the basic structure of the scheme. The basic rate of child maintenance is a percentage of the income of the non-resident parent. No self-support allowance, a deduction from income to allow for essential living, is included. The liability is a percentage of the whole income. The schemes set up in 2003 and 2012 were set up without reference to the system of welfare support. The interaction between the welfare support and child maintenance is problematic. The child maintenance scheme has two thresholds. Below the first threshold, parents pay only a nominal amount, a flat rate. Above the second threshold, they pay the full basic rate amount. In between, there is a catch-up region where parents have to pay a larger percentage of each pound earned, the reduced rate, so that the full basic amount is paid by the time the second threshold is reached. The parents paying the reduced rate can be worse off for every £1 earned, and parents paying the basic rate are only a few pence better off for every pound earned. In effect, these parents get no financial benefit for being in work. The better option for them is to be unemployed. It is also interesting to note that the values of the two thresholds were decided in 1998 and haven't been changed in the 23 intervening years. In 1998, it was decided that a non-residential parent should not pay more than a nominal amount of earnings less than £100 a week and should not pay the full amount until earning more than £200 a week. These thresholds no longer make sense in terms of affordability, but changing them will not resolve the issues of the 2003 and 2012 arrangements. There is a great deal of very positive work being achieved by the Child Maintenance Service, but I urge my noble friend, the Minister, to look at these flawed regulations. Thank you.
I call Baroness Sherlock.
Lords, I remind the committee that a long time ago I was a non-executive director of the Child Maintenance and Enforcement Commission, and even longer ago, chief executive of One Parent Families. I'm grateful to the noble Lord Farmer for securing this debate, as we rarely get to discuss child maintenance, and it's really important. His opening speech began with a history lesson, capped fascinatingly by the noble and learned Lord Mackay of Clashfern, who reminded us just why we need an effective statutory child maintenance service, a cause he has long championed. The noble Lord Farmer also gave us a tour d'horizon of many of the key policy issues relating to child support, with the noble Lady Baroness Eaton offering some more in her contribution. I'm going to focus more on the operational questions. But I want to start by agreeing with Lord Farmer that it's important wherever possible that both parents should contribute towards the cost of bringing up children after a relationship has broken up. Children are a lifelong responsibility for their parents, and it can be important for them to know that both parents continue to support them. And I do agree with the noble Lord McCall about the importance of good support for families at every stage. There's also clear research evidence demonstrating the role child maintenance can play in helping to lift single parents out of poverty. This is really important, my lords, given we went into the pandemic with 4.3 million children living in families in relative poverty. And given the scarring effect in later life of living in poverty as a child, the stakes are very high. Now, ministers often say that work is the best route out of poverty, but working poverty is now at a record level of 17.4%. Interestingly, a recent IPPR report found that the poverty rate for couples with one full-time earner is now 31%. And since, of course, single-parent households tend to have just one earner, it's perhaps not surprising that almost half of children living in single-parent households are in poverty. But if a single parent's already working full-time, they can't really make much more money by earning more, so getting maintenance paid in full and on time may be their best chance of lifting their children out of poverty. Unfortunately, my lords, too much maintenance goes unpaid, and it must be said the Child Maintenance Service has not had a good pandemic. And that's not a reflection on the hard-working staff of the CMS. But when COVID hit, a large number of staff were redeployed away from the CMS to help process universal credit claims. Can the Minister tell us how many? My other friend, Lady Massey of Darwin, was pushing on this as well. Now, I understand the need for more staff processing universal credit claims, but the fact is single parents paid the price for that. Victoria Benson, CEO of Gingerbread, said that for much of the pandemic, CMS was, and I quote, running a skeleton service, meaning they are now, as a rule, not enforcing payment and are allowing paying parents to reduce or withdraw maintenance payment without any proper evidence, end quotes. And single parents are still now complaining to Gingerbread that CMS is not enforcing child maintenance owed to them. Now, I looked at the last official child maintenance statistical report. It came out on the 23rd of April. We're due another one any day. But that one covered the last quarter of 2020. It said that the CMS had resumed virtually all areas of service delivery, and we're now focusing on the recovery and enforcement of outstanding arrears. So can the Minister tell us what the current situation is? Is CMS now operating a full service in all areas? Are they using their full range of enforcement powers? Crucially, are there as many staff now in CMS as there were before the pandemic? And do they have a plan for tackling those arrears? My noble friend Lady Massey raised the question of the reduction in the period of time for considering a paying parent's maintenance liability where their income had changed because of COVID. That was cut from 12 weeks down to 2. That protects paying parents, but of course it hits receiving parents. CMS said it would revert to 12 weeks as soon as possible. Can the Minister say, is that still in force? And if so, when will it revert? The statistics show that in the last quarter ending December 2020, of paying parents who pay via Collect and Pay, 50% paid over 90% of their child maintenance. That counts as fully compliant. 22% paid something, but 28% paid nothing at all. Does the Minister think that's acceptable? And if not, is there a target to improve it? And I think we need to look at those stats in the light of the fact that more people have moved on to benefits. People on benefits are more likely to pay child maintenance because it's knocked directly off their benefit payments before they get it. Indeed, 40% of all Collect and Pay cases now involve deductions from benefits, which is would normally be more like 21 to 24%. So that's actually flattering the compliance rate. And what about the amounts? In the quarter to September 2020, I think the statistics say 41.1 million was paid through Collect and Pay. But by the last quarter, when things were allegedly back to normal, that only went up by £1 million. That seems to leave 15.2 million of maintenance uncollected in that quarter alone. Well, Lord, that's £15 million that could have been spent on feeding and clothing children. And in fact, since 2012, when the government created the child maintenance service, £395 million in unpaid maintenance is owed through Collect and Pay. That's roughly 9% of all the maintenance ever due to be paid since the new service started. So, my lords, the government closed down the previous service, reformed the system, and created what we have now. So it's their baby. Are they happy with how it's doing? And my lords, that's just those who get into the statutory system. Like my noble friend Lady Massey and the noble and learned Lord Mackay of Clashfern, I worry about the impact of charging. And I'd also like to know how much maintenance is being paid through private arrangements. Finally, a consultation was launched just last Friday on making some changes to CMS. I read that the proposals are to change how unearned income is treated, to enable the writing off of low amounts of debt, to allow CMS notifications to be sent digitally, and some other stuff about who has to provide information. Can the Minister tell us, can all of those changes on which the consultation is addressing, can they all be made in secondary legislation? Will DWP analyse the responses to the consultation before they publish the draft legislation? I know that sounds obvious, but it doesn't always happen. And the NAO is also preparing a report on the CMS. Will they await the final NAO report before making any changes? My lords, child maintenance matters to parents and to society, but above all, it matters to children, since my noble friend Lady Massey always reminds us the welfare of the child is paramount. We owe it to our children to have a well-functioning, supportive system of child maintenance in Britain. I look forward to the Minister's reply.
I call the Minister, Baroness Steadman-Scott.
My Lords, I would like to thank Lord Farmer for his question, which has led to this important, short, albeit short debate today. And I also want to thank all noble lords who've participated and made many excellent points. I completely agree with the noble Baroness Sherlock. We all agree that this is an important subject and an important area of work. In summing up, I'll try to address as many of the points as I can, and if I cannot address all the points, then I will write to all colleagues in detail. I actually hold MP surgeries every quarter with MPs from the Commons, and all MPs who have written to me personally about cases, I have dealt with each and every one. And so I am going to commit to organising an all-peers child maintenance session so that we have the time after this debate to get into the detail that I know all noble lords want to do. My noble friend Lord McCall and noble Baroness Eaton wanted to know that the child maintenance system was working. We actually continue to keep the child maintenance policy and our operational delivery under constant review. I was pleased that my noble friend Baroness Eaton referred to the new digital services, such as the Apply Online service, which has been introduced and which has reduced average application times and is available 24/7 and allows greater flexibility for separated parents to contact the child maintenance service. Operational reforms such as these help improve outcomes for children by enabling parents to set up and manage child maintenance arrangements in ways that suit their own circumstances. The Noble Baroness Massey and the Noble Baroness Sherlock raised the National Audit Office report. I'm pleased to confirm that our officials are working well with the National Audit Office. It's work in progress. It is a value for money study and it will be completed during October and November. In terms of child maintenance performance and track record, I know many of you will have experience of various child maintenance schemes already referred to by the noble and learned Lord Mackay that there have been over the years. And this is an area where the government has learned a lot. The government's completely committed to ensuring that parents play their part and take responsibility for supporting their children. The child maintenance system has had a difficult history in our country, but I'm sure most colleagues would agree that the child maintenance service is a significant improvement. As already has been referenced, over 750,000 children are now covered by child maintenance arrangements, and in the last year, 2019 to 20, over £1 billion was due to be paid through direct pay and pay through direct pay and collect and pay. As the compliance rate for parents on collect and pay services increased significantly, rising by 6 percentage points between the quarter ending December 18 and December 20, the noble Baroness Massey said, in terms of the COVID public health emergency, a number of temporary changes were made to the child maintenance surgery. And the question that the noble Baroness Sherlock asked me, there were 1,507 FTEs redeployed in the COVID emergency to make sure we could get money to people. But I can give you a categorical assurance they're all back, and we're back into full service mode. In December 2020, over 40,000 paying parents on the collect and pay service had a deductions from earnings order in place, collecting over 25 million, and over 60,000 deductions from benefit were in force, and over 3,500 deduction orders were in place, collecting a record of 3.3 million from bank accounts. I'm confident that we will maintain these improvements as we move forward. Noble Lords, Lord Farmer, Noble Baroness Massey, Noble Baroness Sherlock have raised the issue of enforcement powers. I can tell you that the enforcement powers that the Child Maintenance Service has are used widely, and that they are absolutely using strong enforcement powers against those who consistently refuse to meet their obligations to support their children. I have to tell you that I have been absolutely staggered at the lengths people will go to avoid paying their child maintenance. And let me tell you this. There was an absent dad who owed £80,000 in child maintenance and thought he could avoid doing it, despite living a great lifestyle. And the enforcement team, the financial investigation team were right behind him, and they managed to get £80,000 as a life-changing amount of money for the receiving parent, and he had £175,000 in the bank. So we're not having any of it, I can tell you that. In terms of child maintenance and child poverty. The Noble Baroness Sherlock raised this issue. We know that child maintenance can play an effective role in reducing child poverty and enhancing the life outcomes of children in separated families. Child maintenance helps to reduce the chances of children being raised in the lowest 20% of the income distribution, and we know that approximately 120,000 fewer children are growing up in poverty as a result. Fewer children are growing up in poverty as a result of child maintenance payments. The issue of lone parents, which was raised by the Noble Baroness Sherlock, lone parents are much more likely to live in low-income households, and extra money coming in through child maintenance can make a real difference to these families, as it's disregarded in full in universal credit. Lone parents get to keep every pound of maintenance paid, and we would like to encourage lone parents on benefits to make claims for child maintenance. I'm pleased to say that my very first visit as a minister was to Gingerbread, and that my colleagues and officials have a very good ongoing relationship with Gingerbread, and families need fathers, and we consistently listen to the issues that they raise with us. I want to come on now to a subject that the Noble Baroness Massey's raised, my noble friend Lord Farmer, and the noble and learned Lord Mackay has raised about parental conflict. When two people fall out, the repercussions are felt far and wide by children, and we are only too aware that what we have to do is to try and intervene at the right time to reduce this conflict, and that is why we have our Reducing Parental Conflict programme, and we are very pleased with the impact it's had to date. And I have to tell you that we have a cross-government department working group on it, the Department for Health and Social Care, Home Office, MHCLG, and of course at this point I want to raise family hubs. We have got 5 government departments working together on family hubs, and we are hoping that the Reducing Parental Conflict programme can be one of the tools in their armoury. And what we do know is the sooner we intervene in the breakdown of a relationship, the better the outcome can be. And I'd be very happy when we meet again to give more information to Noble Lords about that. Before I close my remarks today and deal with some of the other issues that have been raised, I want to touch on the issue of domestic abuse, which I know is a matter of deep concern to all Noble Lords. It's vital that the Child Maintenance Service plays its part in supporting victims of domestic abuse. We'll continue to waive the application fee for domestic abuse victims, and will continue to provide support to allow victims to set up maintenance arrangements safely. The Child Maintenance Service has ramped up domestic abuse training for frontline staff, and will continue to review its ways of working to further embed a culture where victims of domestic abuse are in absolute poverty. And they are a priority. In that vein, I am in the process of commissioning an independent review of ways in which the Child Maintenance Service supports victims of domestic abuse. Noble Lords have raised the issue of the consultation, which we have issued and which we are embarking on. And I would give an invitation to all Noble Lords. If they've got other things they want us to consider, the door is open and they should let us know what they are. I'd like now to cover some of the other important issues that have been raised. We are grateful to SAC for raising issues, and we've had the opportunity to discuss them with concerned stakeholders, and the views expressed will be used to inform future policy development. The Noble Baroness Sherlock, I think I've already said that the system is now fully operational, and the number of staff on child maintenance is gone from 5,500 to 4,700 due to the last CSA cases being closed. And capacity of the system is broadly at pre-COVID levels. The Noble Lords have raised the issue about aligning Great Britain with other jurisdictions. We are in close contact with officials in other jurisdictions, and as my noble friend Lord Farmer has observed, it's hard to transplant measures from one jurisdiction to another, but we continue to monitor international developments in this field. I do believe that covers the issue of the situation in Australia. On dual income, it does add significant complexity to a child maintenance calculation, and measures that work in one place don't necessarily work in another, but I'm happy to continue to discuss and keep the issue under review. In terms of family-based arrangements, we recognise conflict is harmful to children, and the intent of the 2012 maintenance reforms was to try and promote collaboration between separated parents. We know that a family-based arrangement is not for everybody, and so we offer other ways of people paying. I think my noble friend Lord McCall and Lord Farmer raised the issue about the appeals process and does it work. We've made changes to the appeals processes, and if a complainant is still not satisfied with the response they have, then they can escalate it to the Parliamentary Health and Service Ombudsman. Let me just finish one point where the Minister has asked us, they've asked the Minister to tell us about the progress of the government's commitment to supporting parents to make family-based arrangements. The survey that we did will be published in due course. I'm very sorry that I've run out of time because it's a subject dear to my heart. I'd spend all day talking to you about it and answering your questions, believe me. But please go away from here understanding child maintenance is important. We're on it, and we're going to make the changes we need to make so that we can take children out of poverty and they can get the best chances in life. I beg to move.
Well, thank you, Minister. That completes the business before the Grand Committee this afternoon.